Well, you brought up some statistics about adoption numbers. And when we talked earlier, I referenced this, but there was a study that we conducted back in March of likely Texas voters with a large N, a small margin of error, about 2% margin of error. And it showed that 29% of Texans own Bitcoin or other digital assets. 29% relative to the national average, which is slightly under 20%. So far and away above the national average. And it's skewed heavily to the under 65s. I think it was only 6% of over 65s own it. 52% of people under the age of 29. So if you can imagine that curve, the way that curve slopes. So as elected officials who are coming up through the ranks, the voters of tomorrow, it's going to be 80, 90% before we know it.
It goes a step further. I agree with all of that, but a Bitcoiner is going to be the president of the United States. Point blank, period, right? But it's not going to be because somebody is like doing memes on the internet and it's like, I'm going to go run for president, right? That's not what I'm talking about. What I mean is, if you look at 50% of people under the age of 29, well, we got a 1 in 2 shot at one of those people ends up becoming president, right? And so naturally what you're seeing is we have politicians that hold this on both the Congress, Senate, both sides of the aisle. We have people at the White House who aren't the president, but staff, et cetera, that hold these assets. And so it's just a matter of time before there ends up being people in positions of power and influence. We're talking about government, but it's true in corporations as well. The CEOs will be Bitcoiners. And it just takes time for that to happen. But I don't think necessarily it's so much about Bitcoin, the asset, as much as it is the way of thinking. And why I reference that is like, some of you in here run companies. Guess what? You're equity holders. But no one's running around and be like, oh shit, do you see that the new CEO holds equities? Like, no, right? Some of you hold gold and you run a company. No one's like, oh shit, we got a gold holder. No, it's the way that they think. And so I think that Bitcoin has this like set of ethos and has this long-term kind of viewpoint of the world that is going to start to permeate our society. The risk that we run is that we don't get those people in the positions of power and influence fast enough. Because if we take too long, there's a lot of shit that's screwed up right now. And there could be major issues and impairments that happen in the economy and in society until we get people in positions that can think long term. Because if I pulled this room right now and asked you, how many of you think politicians think long term? I bet you I don't get a single person raising their hand. Because the incentives are off, right? You can't think 20 years in advance if literally you got to make sure you get reelected in 4 years, right? That's not the politician's fault. That's the way the system's set up. But if we understand that, no, what if we could get these people to think long term, whether they're in office or out of office? And as a collective society, we all started to think longer term. Well, we probably would take on many more bold and ambitious challenges, and we'd start to do things that maybe right now we're either disincentivized from doing, or we don't really see a clear path to trying to tackle. And so I think that's really what is the powerful part about Bitcoin, is like the way that people think can change. And if we can change our collective thought, then that's pretty powerful.